Journalism is fundamentally important to our democracy. Why do I say that? Journalism is about asking all the right questions in the pursuit of truth. In our democracy, we as citizens have a right and a desire to know what's going on by our corporations, by our politicians, by all sorts of organizations in our society. And journalists are the ones who play that role. They've played that role for a very long time. And frankly, there's no one else. Journalists are trained. They know how to ask the right questions. They know how to listen. They develop those working theories, those stories. They develop those data points. They have a rigorous approach to challenging the ideas, challenging what they're told, knowing what's a fact and what's not, triangulating the information that they get. Therefore, they know how to present the truth. And it is part of journalism to have that integrity, that objectivity. I was really fortunate early on to have mentors and trainers who taught me the value of objectivity. That objectivity really is the most important characteristic of professional advice. So we as citizens rely on that objectivity that journalists give us as part of our democracy. They're the ones who challenge and check all of those institutions and individuals who would prefer sometimes that we not know the truth, that we are hidden from the facts, that we only understand things as they want to present it. I think we all know that in the turbulent times in which we live, more and more today, people and organizations want to present things in a certain way. They don't necessarily want us to know the truth. That's why today, more than ever, journalism matters. True journalism and that integrity and that objectivity really matters. That's why I get so upset, frankly, when I see so-called journalists on television losing it on their objectivity, and demonstrating their bias. We just had an election here in Canada, and we all saw journalists who were literally cheering for a political party or a candidate. Are they entitled to their own opinions? Of course they are. They're human beings. That integrity, that objectivity is what matters. We as citizens rely on their objective accounting of what's happening before us so that we can make our own decisions. When journalists cross over from recounting the events and telling us the stories of what's happening to giving us their opinions and their ideas and what they think, they then cross over into being entertainers. They are paid entertainers at that point, and they're no longer journalists. And they lose that fundamental integrity around what it is to be a journalist. And in our democracy and in our society, that's a problem. That's a real problem. Recently, we had the pleasure of celebrating World Press Freedom. Many countries do this, and it's important that we take a moment to celebrate World Press Freedom. So what do those organizations do? Well, they celebrate those journalists who exhibit merit for their work, merit for their tenacity, for their bravery, for how they've gone about collecting the stories, for their integrity, for overcoming the obstacles, for addressing the legal concerns, for the institutions and the individuals who've put up roadblocks. to prevent them from getting the stories. And in many, many cases, those individuals, or in some cases, groups of individuals, have found a way past. They have found a way to ask those questions and find the truth and tell the truth. And we as a society benefit greatly from their efforts. They are unsung heroes in the war, in the battle for our democracy and for our society. So World Press Freedom takes a moment to celebrate those individuals. It is no exaggeration to say that many of these individuals have risked personal harm and put their lives on the line. And I don't just mean in war zones, which obviously happens, but individuals here in Canada who've had death threats, who have had hits put out on their lives, simply for asking the questions. So we have to ask ourselves, if the stakes are that high, how important is the truth? Obviously, it's important. And we should be asking those questions. And we should be asking ourselves, what is the truth that some people are trying to hide or taint or make sure that we don't get? So thankfully, there are still journalists today who are out there asking those tough questions, following a rigorous process and an approach on our behalf to find the truth. This matters. And this objectivity matters in a day and an age when you know as well as I do that we are bombarded with information of a sort. Largely people's opinions that comes across our devices in every way, shape, or form, often in 140 character segments. And it's a blast. It's just a blast of people's idea, opinion, and there's not really much behind it. Sometimes there is. Sometimes it comes from a journalist. Sometimes it comes from a great source. Sometimes it's well thought out. Of course it is. But that's hard to find, and it's hard to weed out from the plethora of nonsense and disinformation and misinformation. And these are words we've all come to know and be very familiar with. That's not going to change. So it's incumbent on us to understand the difference and to support journalists and journalism and those who continuously and actively pursue the profession. And by that, I mean not just have the title, but those who do it properly and maintain their objectivity and maintain that integrity. So when I see so-called journalists abusing that privilege and abusing that right, we have a problem. And we have a problem here in Canada and elsewhere when those journalists cross the line and take for granted that opportunity that they have to be objective and keep their integrity and do that job properly, because we as citizens are relying on them to do their jobs and to do it with integrity and maintain that unbiased pursuit of the truth. World Press Freedom is also an opportunity to take a moment and respectfully remember those who have put their lives on the line in war zones and in conflict zones. So it made me stop and think about the privilege I had to be in war zones and in conflict zones and post-conflict zones with many members of the journalism tribe as they were actively seeking stories. So I had the opportunity to live with and work with a number of those folks who were just starting out. A lot of them were freelance journalists. They started as freelance journalists, which I don't think I appreciated it at the time. They weren't there and funded by big networks or big media organizations. They were there on their own dime a lot of the time. And they were digging out stories, finding that working theory, as I call it, and then checking their sources and talking to people. And it would take days, sometimes weeks, to find that story and enough of that story and check that information and find all of the sources relevant before they could write it and take it to the various organizations. And it would often develop into a story over days, over weeks, and then it would get picked up again by networks and so on. It took a lot of time and an incredible amount of effort. And in a war zone, it regularly meant putting their lives on the line. They didn't have security details. They didn't have people looking out for them. They had to do it on their own. They started as freelance journalists, and they maintained that integrity and that process and that rigorous approach to telling us the stories. And they got in behind the truth so that we, as citizens and citizens of the world, because they were telling the whole world what was going on and why it was happening. And that was so important to all of us and our democracy and our way of life. That's why I think today I get so offended when I see others take it lightly or abuse it or take advantage of it, because it is so integral to what we require as a society and in democracy and in our daily lives, that objective pursuit of the truth. It is so easy for organizations, and it doesn't matter, it's churches, it's synagogues, it's our local sports teams, it's businesses, all have a particular agenda to pursue. Of course we do. But how we understand that and how it affects how we make decisions, how we make decisions in our lives and in our businesses. I talk a lot in the book that I wrote, Optimize the Moment, about how important it is to do the intelligence gathering and to do it objectively. It is important for us as leaders, if we are business leaders or we're leaders of another organization, to do so responsibly and to make sure we pursue the truth. We do that through a rigorous approach, an approach to asking questions, asking objective questions, meaning that we are looking for answers that may be uncomfortable, may be contrary to our own ideas and our own opinions. That's how we learn. That's how we get better. That's how we find new ideas, things that we haven't thought of before. As business leaders and as leaders of a variety of different organizations, and frankly, even for our own families, that's how we make better decisions. In the book, I talk about how we apply this to making better decisions for our businesses. And in turbulent times, like the times we're in today, this has never been more important. Intelligence gathering for our businesses and making better decisions today, when things are so emotive and so sensational, and the information is coming at us so quickly and so rapidly, it has never been more important for us as leaders to seek the truth and to be objective, take a breath, and take an opportunity to develop that working theory, to test the data points, do the analysis, find people around us who have different ideas and opinions than we do to check us, and make sure that we develop a plan and make decisions to go forward that is truly based on the truth and be as objective as possible. That's how we can really understand the environment that we're in, understand the landscape that we're in, and understand how we can make the best decisions for our businesses and for our families. It is only then, in the relentless pursuit of truth, that we can move ourselves and our families and our businesses forward. Journalists and journalism really is an incredibly important role in our democracy and in our society. And we really owe a lot to the journalists who do it well, who have laid the foundation for doing it with the utmost professionalism and objectivity. I think of the Peter Jennings of this world, who is a great Canadian who went on to be the anchor for ABC News, who really kind of set the stage for those who followed. He was a great conflict journalist and spent an awful lot of time in war zones as well. But that storytelling and identifying those great stories based in truth and in objectivity helped us as citizens make better decisions for our lives and for our families. They helped us, frankly, to optimize the moments and understand the moments in which we were living. That is our opportunity. It's our obligation as citizens, and it's our opportunity as leaders. Now is the time to optimize the moment.